I know it looks so bad.
But
But
it's
smiling at that.
oh wow.
It was the hard and soft radiation I've heard.
Okay, so this is the way hard radiation.
You get it wrong?
What I got confused on the.
I already saw one person got wrong. Remember I told you somebody was gonna get wrong the question?
Which one?
The crest from one crest to the next.
I already saw one person got it wrong. So I was tell you.
Did I get it right?
I tell you.
The
No, I got
also
confused
called
with the hard
alveolar
and soft
process
radiation.
from
Hard
lavender.
is
I got
the
that
one that
This is
penetrates
the
through.
one.
What is that?
Is
Yes.
the
Lavender.
gonna go through.
Also,
Soft
really
radiation
fast,
is the long waves.
The first thing we
I
think
I
I got that
put,
one right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I put,
It makes me feel a little better. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what it
Which
is.
one are you?
also called the lamina dura.
Lamina
Oh,
dura.
then I
I
got
got
that right.
I'm confused. I don't know what I put.
Cortical plate, the lamina dura.
Cortical plate yeah.
All right. Well, today we're studying about this guy.
Bones of the head.
Yeah, bones of the head. All right, and muscles of the head and the sinuses in the head. And I forgot my pointer. Yikes.
Not too bad. Well, until I got it, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't remember anything. You froze up. But the one before that was definitely worse. The test before.
All right. Never fails. All right, so bones of the head. Everybody have the right book page? This, I think, is in your book, in the, one of the graphs or images that are in the back. Okay, so these are all the bones that we're going to be studying, and I'll tell you which ones you need to know. There's a lot of bones, 22 bones. I'll tell you which ones are the important ones and what you need to know about each bone and what you need to study. Okay, so pay attention. That's what's on the test. All right, so the skull. We all have a skull. It's divided into two parts. Okay, you have the cranium, which is the hollow part of the skull. Okay, that holds your brain. Okay, and then you have the facial bones. Okay, skull is supported by your spine. Okay, by the spinal cord. It rests on the spinal cord, and it's the framework for your head. So, it consists of, like I said, 22 bones. The cranium itself has 8 bones. Okay, and again, the cranium has your brain. That's what holds the main functioning computer, basically. Okay, so the 8 bones are the frontal bone. Okay, you need to know the frontal bone, and where would the frontal bone be? In front. Okay, right here. Frontal bone. Yeah, they've missed it. Believe me. Makes up the forehead and part of the orbits, which are the eyes. Okay, so this part right here is the frontal bone and part of the nasal cavity. Okay, so here's the frontal bone outlined in green. Again, part of the orbits, part of the nasal cavity, and the top of your head. Okay. Parietal bones, there's 2 of those. Okay, one on each side, left and right. Okay, so parietal bones, they make up, basically, they're the largest bones. They make up basically the top, the roof of the skull, and the sides of the skull. So it's these guys right here. So the top of your head. So you got the frontal bone, parietal bones, and there's two. You can see where they're sutured right in the middle. Okay, so this is just looking at one side. It's this green part. That's the parietal bone. Okay? There's two temporal bones, a left and a right. They form the base as well as the sides of the skull, both temporal, and this is the important part of the temporal bone. They contain the glenoid fossa, and you're going to hear that over and over and over, and it's in multiple questions. The glenoid fossa, what it does, where it's at, what goes into the glenoid fossa, what bone is, in what bone is the glenoid fossa, and what part of the mandible goes into the glenoid fossa. And the glenoid fossa is you're going to hear over and over, so learn that. Okay, so left and right temporal bones are right here, right where your temple is. Okay, left and right. Okay, so here it is. Okay, so if you go right here where your temple is, that's this, oops, this area right in here. Okay, so this is the temporal bone again, right here, and one right here. The glenoid fossa is this little dip right here. Okay, so if I take the jaw out where I have my finger, that's the glenoid fossa. Again, fossa is it came up in the test, and I repeated it over and over and over on the teeth. So glenoid fossa is a depression. Okay, a depression. So this fossa you need to know. The other one you didn't really need to know. So right there where my finger is, that's the glenoid fossa. Okay, where the jaw, we'll talk about the jaw in a bit, goes in to the glenoid fossa that's on the temporal bone. Okay, and there's two, one on the left, one on the right. So right there is the glenoid fossa. Okay, then you have a sphenoid bone, and it's kind of hard to see unless you open the skull. You can see it a little bit right here, but if you open the skull, it's kind of an internal bone, and it's this guy right here. Okay, it kind of looks like it looks like a bat, like a stretched out bat. Okay, so this is the sphenoid bone, also forms part of the orbit and the base of the skull there. Okay, if you're looking through the eyes, again, it forms the back of the orbit, a little bit of the nasal cavity, and kind of is above the temporal bone there on the side. But this one's the one that looks like a spread out bat with open wings. And that comes out, that question I think is on your final exam. Which bone looks like a bat with spread out wings? It's a sphenoid bone. Okay? Again, that's looking at it right there. And we'll talk about some of these in a bit, but that's what it looks like. Okay? This guy is not really a big part. It's part of the sphenoid bone, but the sphenoid bone contains the sella turcica. Not too important for you to know, but it's important because the sella turcica holds the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is a very important gland. It's basically the mother gland, basically. It controls all your other glands. So it's in the middle of the skull for a reason, because without your pituitary gland, you're done. Okay, so it's small and protected by this big shell and all the hard structures, because it has to be protected. It's basically the motherboard of your regulatory system. Okay, so that's why it's surrounded by everything else and right in the center. So not too important for you to know, but it is part of that bone, the sphenoid bone. And that's kind of what it looks like on a set. That little cradle right there, that's the sella turcica. Pterygoid process, the wing portion of the sphenoid bone contains two pterygoid plates. Again, we showed those on that one picture. Those are the open wings of the bat. Hamulus is the spiny portion that comes out, this little bone down here, and you don't really have to know too much about that, but again, it's just part of that sphenoid bone. A process, and you'll hear this word also a lot, is basically an extension. Okay, so if I'm the main part of the bone, I've got a process, or my arms would be processes, or a process, and it's basically an extension of me. Okay, so the sphenoid bone has a hamulus, which is a process. Okay, it's an extension, and it's a pterygoid process. Here, pterygoid process coming this way, and the hamulus is this little spiny one right here. Okay, so remember, process is just an extension, and you're going to hear that over and over. The ethmoid bone is a thin bone located at the front portion of the cranium's base, situated between the orbits. It forms the roof of the septum and sides of the nose. So if you look through here, it's kind of up underneath the base of the nose, right in there. And so this is the top. If I'm looking inside the skull and looking through it, it's right here, the ethmoid bone. Okay, so it's, again, forms the base, part of the base of the skull and a little bit of the inside of the orbit. And the last bone is the occipital bone. Okay, the occipital bone is this bone back here, the base of your skull right here. And the important part of the occipital bone is this guy. Okay, foramen magnum. Foramen, we said before, was a opening. Okay, so this is foramen magnum, big opening, big foramen magnum. Okay, the foramen magnum is a large opening in the occipital bone through which the spinal cord, spinal nerves, and vertebral arteries pass. Okay, this is where you're connected. Okay, your computer's connected through here. So everything comes out of here. Most everything comes out of here. All the wires up to the computer. Okay, you break that, or you split that, or damage it somehow. I mean, that's how you end up with paralysis or something. Okay, so the important thing is that foramen magnum. External occipital protuberance is this little bump. Okay, if you feel the back of your skull and you'll feel a bump, that's the external occipital. Because of the occipital bone, protuberance is just a bump. Another word for bump. Okay, and what all these little processes and bumps and ridges and hyoid ridge and external oblique ridge and all those, basically that's where we're going to see all these muscles attaching. Okay, so this is here for a reason, because a muscle or a tendon attaches right here. Okay, or this little bump right here, we get muscles that attach to it. The styloid, something attaches to that. Okay, so they're there for a purpose, and I'll tell you which ones you need to know. Okay, so again, here's the occipital bone, the foramen magnum. Here's the protuberance. Okay, questions on those 8 bones. Here's your spinal cord coming up again to the base of that foramen magnum. Okay, those bones, know those bones, just basically what I told you. Okay, the questions will be, which you'll see on the exam, you'll see a diagram, that diagram that's in the back, and you'll have a number, what bone is this, what bone is this, and I don't think you need to, I think I give you the list of them, you don't have to.
On the study guide.
Yeah, on the study guide. And you brought that up. I did print it this time. So take one, I didn't forget to print it, but I forgot to give it. So pass that around. Yeah, so I think it's just matching, or I don't think you need to fill in the blank yet. So you need to name those bones, okay? And again, the major frontal, temporal, parietal, occipital. The internal bones, I don't think we do. The one question is that sphenoid, okay? And I don't think it comes out on this exam.
Just remember.
But it may.
Yeah.
Okay, so the facial bones, Okay, so those 8 are the cranial bones. The facial bones, there's 14 bones. Okay, there's 2 nasal bones. Nasal, where would you think they'd be? On your nose, right at the top of the nose, the bridge of the nose. There are 2 bones situated side by side which make up the bridge of the nose. Okay, right up there. The vomer. Now this one is hard to see. This is right below the ethmoid bone through the nose. Okay, so it's basically the base down here, the bottom. So you got the ethmoid bone coming through here, and you got the vomer underneath, which kind of separates the nasal cavity. This bone separates the 2 nasal chambers that are usually unequal in size. Okay, so the vomer coming right through there. Okay, if you look at the side of the nose again, you got your nasal bone, and you've got the ethmoid bone, which is the top part of the what we call the septum, or whatever they call. You have a deviated septum. These bones are the ones that are dividing it. So you have the ethmoid, and then the vomer is down here, and then the rest of your nose is all cartilage. Okay, inferior nasal concha, those are the bones on the sides of your nasal cavity. Okay, they're kind of spiral, and they're spongy, kind of like honeycomb, if you look at them. But they're these here on the side. Lacrimal bones. Lacrimal means tears. Okay, so the bones located at the front portion, inner walls of the orbit. So where right when your tears come out, yeah, those are the lacrimal bones. Okay, right where the tears come out. Okay, these bones are located at the front portion of the inner wall of each orbit. Okay, so right in there. Maxilla, this one you need to know, okay, because teeth are on your maxilla. Okay, forms the floor of the orbits, floor of the nose, roof of the mouth, often called the upper jaw, which is the maxilla. It is the largest bone in the upper face, has a body, and again, 4 processes. And the processes are what? The extensions. Okay, so it has a body. The maxilla has a body, and then it has 4 processes. One coming out this way, one coming down, and one going up. Okay, and then extending back into the base of the roof of your mouth. So, one of the important things about the maxillary bone is this guy. You probably heard about it last week when we were talking about x-rays, and you'll talk about it today when we're taking x-rays, is the maxillary sinus. Okay, the maxillary sinus is a large cavity within the maxilla. We talked about when you look at the roots of the upper teeth, the teeth sometimes go, the maxillary posterior teeth, the molars or the wisdom teeth, will have 3 roots that go up into the maxillary sinus. Okay, and the sinus is just basically an airspace. There's a maxillary tuberosity, so know the maxillary sinus. The tuberosity isn't that important, other than it attaches some muscles attached there. The tuberosity is this bump way in the back, and if you put your finger or your tongue way behind your last tooth, you'll feel this maxillary tuberosity. Again, just means a little bone growth or a little bone extension there. Okay, so here's the maxilla. All, not the green teeth, but just the bone. Okay, so you got an extension that way, and down, and then one that goes back. So it's got 4 processes, and we'll point those out right now. Just looking at the underside, again, to the hard palate. That's the maxillary bone, or your upper jaw. Okay, so here, I'm just pointing out, here's the sinus. That's the sinus cavity, just an airspace, and the roots of the maxillary teeth go up, and on your x-ray will appear like they're actually going into the sinus. Okay, so this is the maxillary bone just split in half, and you're looking at the sinus. Again, this is the sinus cavity right here. When we say we're looking at the floor of the sinus, it's this little thin line that you can see kind of going up and down and around the teeth. Okay, that's the maxillary sinus, this void up in here. Okay, and the tuberosity is this guy back here on your x-ray. Okay, the processes we talked about on the maxilla, there's 4. The zygomatic process is your cheekbone. Okay, this guy right here. So from the maxilla, you've got one extension that goes out into your cheekbone, right here, and it joins the zygomatic arch, which is part of your temporal bone. Okay, so we're going in. So your zygomatic process is this extension right here. Forms part of the cheekbone. Okay, so this guy right here. Palatine process, where would you think that be? Palate. Perfect. Okay, so you've got this part would be your palatine process. Okay, so in here. See, and you've got one on each side. Okay, so you've got this process right here is your other extension. Forms the roof of the mouth and the base of the nasal cavity. Frontal process can be traced upward and backward along the side of the nose. Okay, so this extension right here, going up in here, this is your frontal process. Then alveolar process can be traced downward from the body of the maxilla. And what's the alveolar process? What was the alveolar process? You guys remember from last week? Where what? What's in the alveolar process? Teeth. That's the extraction site, right? When we take the teeth out, we've got the alveolar process, and that's this part where the teeth are in. So that's why it's called the alveolar process, because it's an extension of the maxilla where the teeth are. Okay? So from here down is the alveolar process.
The
Sockets of the teeth. Exactly. So again, it's a process, it's just an extension. So from the body of the maxilla, you've got 4 processes. You've got the zygomatic, the frontal, the alveolar process coming down for the teeth, and then the palatal process or palatine process. Those are the 4. Not, too important. You need to know the maxilla, know the maxillary sinus. I'll tell you what you need to know right now about the palatine bones. But just know that there's 4 processes that make up the maxilla. Okay, zygomatic bones. Again, that's what we talked about right now. It forms the other part of the cheekbone. Okay, going around the back here. And the side of the orbit of the eye. That's these guys right here. Palatine bones. Okay, that's again the palate, situated in the back portion of the nasal cavity. That thing goes way back here. And it looks like a small bone when you look at it, right in here, because you're only looking at the top of it, or the bottom of it, however you want to think of it. But when you look at that bone, that's actually a big bone. Here's the base of here's what we're looking at, the floor of the hard palate, or the soft palate right here. And that bone goes up the side, and actually goes up into the eye socket. Okay, so here's part of the side of the eye. Okay, your lower jaw this guy. The skull's only movable bone. It is the longest and the strongest. Okay, bone of the face. Okay, if you start it from here and stretch it out, you know, it's a long bone. It'll probably be about this wide. The longest and the strongest, this guy. So you got the maxilla, the upper jaw, mandible, the lower jaw. Okay, made up of horseshoe-shaped body, which is horizontal, and 2 vertical extensions called the rami. So the body is this guy, not my body. The mandible has a body, the maxilla has a body. There's a question on the mandible and the maxilla, and it'll say a body, so don't think of me as the body or your body. Think about the body of the mandible, okay? So it has a horizontal body, because on the question they get it confused, because it says it's perpendicular to the body, and well, if it's my body, then it's this part of the mandible is parallel, you know, to my body, but it's perpendicular to the body of the mandible. Okay? Don't confuse that. So here's the body, and then again, horizontal and 2 vertical extension. This part right here, from where it bends, these guys, that part of the mandible right here, which is vertical, is called a ramus. And there's 2, so the plural is rami. Like cactus and cacti, ramus and rami. Okay? Okay, so the body and the ramus, one on each side. And the ramus has these guys. Okay, the angle of the mandible, this is the angle of the mandible right here, right where it forms an angle. This is normally where the mandible breaks. If somebody breaks, or they'll break up here. They'll break the angle of the mandible right here. So where the ramus and the body come together, that's the angle. Okay, so the ramus has 2 processes, which are what? What's a process? An extension. So here's the ramus, so where are the processes? Up here, right? These little horns. This guy is called the coronoid process, because the coronoid, cuerno, means a horn. Okay? The coronoid process is the one anterior. Again, these processes, that's where muscles are going to attach to, so you can open and close your jaw. And this guy is the condyloid process, condyle, okay, TMJ, talk about that again. The 2 processes are the extensions of the ramus. Coronoid, condyloid. Okay. The condyloid is the posterior one. It consists of a neck. Okay, so it's got a neck here. The condyle fits into the glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. Okay, so know that the condyloid process, not the coronoid process, fits into the glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. Okay, again, the temporal bone, glenoid fossa, that's where it articulates. That's your temporal mandibular joint. Okay? So the glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. The condyloid condyle, this is what's called the condyle, and again, they break their jaw right there, right at the condyle, because it's the thinnest part. Somebody gets hit, this pushes up against the base of the skull and it cracks right here. And then the coronoid, because it looks like a horn. Okay, so condyloid, coronoid. The condyloid, the back one, is the one that goes into the glenoid fossa. Okay, sigmoid notch is the notch between the processes. This notch right here, okay, is the sigmoid notch. I guess Dr. Sigmoid discovered it, or he named it. So the depression between the coronoid and the condyloid processes, okay, is that guy right here. The symphysis, okay, is as when you're a baby, this guy, you know, it's split down the middle. jaw right here. So a thick ridge at the median, what's median, the middle, okay, line of the mandible. So right here, this ridge right here, kind of a thick piece of bone right here, is your symphysis. Mental, again, protuberance is just a bump. Triangular projection at the area of the chin. Okay, your mental muscle, and we'll talk about muscles in a bit. This, and you'll see this on, some guys have like a split chin or a dimple in their chin. That's this guy. Okay, that mental protuberance, the bone right here, it's a triangle. Okay, your mental muscle is right here. You see the muscles, what they do right now. Okay, these guys are kind of hard to see, but external oblique means at an angle, so a ridge, and you can kind of see a ridge on, it kind of goes on the outside here. Okay, it starts from the base of the ramus and comes and kind of joins the not the symphysis, the mental protuberance up in this area. Okay, so this ridge right here. And again, onto here is where muscles are going to attach, right to this external oblique ridge. And then, okay, alveoli, again, those are the actual sockets of the teeth from the alveolar bone, alveoli, located in the superior border body of the mandible. These are the sockets of the teeth. So if I take a tooth out of the alveolar process, the alveoli is the actual socket. Okay, so condyloid, coronoid, and coronoid here. This is the condyloid also. We're just looking at this guy like this. Okay, the angle of the mandible. Okay. The sigmoid notch. The symphysis, the front triangle, or I'm sorry, the where it joins. The symphysis is the middle. The alveoli, again, where the sockets are, the sockets of the teeth. External oblique ridge comes through here. And I didn't know, mental protuberance is that triangle right here in the front. Okay? Easy as pie. And
This test comes.
this is what you guys have in your book. And you guys also have this. This isn't the one that you get on the test, you get the lateral one, the one that's cited. I think, pretty sure.
This one?
Yeah.
No,
This one we get on the test?
no, the full head, the side of the head.
Oh, okay.
It's that one. Okay. So those are the bones. And what's in the bones? So 22 bones, 8 cranial, 14 facial. Okay? All right, the hard palate, the roof of the oral cavity is made up of 4 bones. Okay, the maxilla, the hard palate, is made up of 4 bones. Palatine, again, process of the maxilla, there's 2. Okay, horizontal plates of the palatine bones, and the palatine processes of the maxilla. That's what makes up the maxillary hard palate. This is on the test. Okay, so the maxilla, it'll ask you what bones make up the maxilla, and you've got 2 palatine processes, again of the maxillary bone, and horizontal plates of the palatine bone, which is that bone that goes up at tall bone that I showed you. So these processes, these two here and these two here. Okay, so the front two are parts of the body of the maxilla. The back two are the horizontal plates of the palatine bone that run up inside the head there. So it'll ask you which processes make up the hard palate. Median palatine suture, that's just where the palate joins again. It's cartilage when you're a baby, and then finally it fuses right in the middle. So the median, again, middle, mesial, median, is that palatine suture right down the middle of the palate. We'll see it right now on an x-ray. Transverse palatine suture, the suture that crosses the palate and separates the hard palate into 4 distinct bones. That one you don't have to worry about. Incisive foramen, incisors, again a foramen is a hole. Incisive foramen right behind the incisors. Is that one? A little foramen right behind there. And sometimes we give a shot right there and it's not good for the patient.
Why?
They don't like it
Why does it
because it
hurt?
hurts.
It seems like it would, anything like poking your ear.
Well,
What would the shot be for? To numb it or?
It's
Well,
like
we're
when you
gonna,
bite
we're
into
gonna
a
take
chip,
out,
the corner of the chip,
if we're just gonna
stabs
do a
it.
filling, we can just infiltrate on the outside, just squirt numbing medicine out here, because this is a kind of a porous bone, so you can just put anesthesia wherever. But if you're gonna take out the tooth, then you need to numb up the palate too, because there's nerves in the bag. So anytime you give a shot, the palate has the gum that's attached to the bone. You know, the tissue on the palate is bonded, you know, to the bone. So you start to inject liquid underneath that tissue, it starts to tear it, and that's what hurts. You start to squirt liquid underneath that tissue, and it starts ripping away from the bone, and that's why it hurts so much in the roof of your mouth. If you inject behind the upper, or up in here where it's called fatty tissue, and there's nothing, you know, and you inject slow. If you inject fast, it's gonna hurt. So if you inject slow and allow the liquid to just kind of find its way through that fatty tissue, and if you're in a muscle, it's gonna hurt, because the muscle, again, there's nowhere for it to go. You're just kind of stretching the muscle. So you want to be like in a fatty area, and you just inject slow, and that's when patients don't feel it. But anywhere where you have a or right underneath the nose, right here,
Where it's like bony kind
yeah,
of?
because there's nowhere for that liquid to go, and you gotta inject really slow for it to be. It hurts here. I mean, you'll see the patients just kind of, they get teary-eyed, and it hurts me to inject them, but you know, you've got to inject. But if you go slow, and I'm usually really slow with my needle, and most of the patients appreciate that. But if you go in there, wherever you go, if you go in fast, it hurts. Okay, so incisive foramen right behind your central incisor. Incisive canals, again, located lateral to the palatine suture. There's a canal right in the foramen there. Greater palatine foramen, located just lingual to the third molar, and we'll talk about these foramens when we're talking about anesthesia. But the greater palatine foramen is way back here. Again, a foramen is just an opening, and just where arteries and veins and nerves come out, right on the next to the third molar. Lesser palatine foramen is just another smaller foramen right next to it. That one you don't have to worry about. But sometimes, if you can't get a patient numb, you can try to find that foramen, and when you find it, you just go put that needle up in there, and that is called a division 2 block, and that just numbs everything. But patients don't like that either. So we don't normally do those shots, but as a last resort, if you can't anesthetize and you need to take a tooth out, you go into that foramen and inject in there, and you'll usually. Okay, so you have this picture as well. So greater palatine foramen, incisive foramen. This also is called nasal palatine foramen, just another name for it. But again, you've got this one here. So the median, the suture, medium palatine suture, transverse suture. This is the one that you'll have on the test, and we'll just have blank lines and you fill in the blanks. Alrighty. Questions on bones? Yeah, let's take a few minute break. Selena knows them all. Right?
Yeah.
Knows them all.